What's up, friends? I am WonderHeart, and welcome to my channel of inner and outer expansion. Today, I feel like sharing with y'all the experience I had the first time I tried DMT. It was quite an expansive experience, totally mind-blowing. It was absolutely crazy. I wasn't quite sure what to expect. And through this experience, I actually had my first ego death. So I'm going to share that with you and kind of what I went through. This was just, it's hard to put into words the experience that you can have while on this. But I'm going to do my best to kind of share what I recall. You know, the ego mind sometimes has trouble taking information in like this. You know, there was just so much going on that the mind isn't used to processing, that it isn't really able to actually take all of that information in and kind of ground it here in this reality. But from what I do recall, I'm going to share that with you. And if you've thought about doing DMT before, or you're just kind of interested in it, or maybe just want to find out what somebody else's experience was compared to your own, stay tuned. We're going to jump into it, and it's going to be fun. So first off, if you're not familiar with DMT, DMT, also known as the spirit molecule, is found naturally here on Earth, okay? You can find DMT in plants, you can find DMT in animals, in fungus, so on and so forth. It's actually, it's created in the brain itself. The body actually produces its own DMT, produces it in dreams, and also it is believed that DMT is released in the brain when somebody passes and they go on to the next life. DMT is supposedly released in the brain, and that kind of is how the soul goes on to the next. Now that's, some people's belief. Not saying you have to believe that, but that's kind of what's going on with DMT. All right. So personally, my experience is it was absolutely amazing, a little frightening, but nonetheless freaking expanding and also pretty beautiful. So now, like anything, I don't urge anybody to go out searching for stuff. If something like this, you've been called to and it finds its way to you, that's when I say, hey, I think it might be okay. But I'm not one to ever say, hey, go searching for something like this. I don't search for hallucinogens if I'm looking for a spiritual experience through some type of hallucinogen. I'm not one to be like, hey, let me call this person until I can find it. This, found myself. I had a good buddy of mine named Thomas reach out to me, and he's like, hey bro, I got DMT, man. Like, do you want to try it? And I had definitely, I'd been called to it before, and I knew at some point I would get the opportunity to, and it finally showed up on my doorsteps back in 2015. And yeah, so pretty cool. It was actually before my awakening, because I didn't wake up until last year in 2018. So, 3 years later. But nonetheless, it was really amazing. First ego death, and it was just something else. So when he came over, I wasn't quite sure how we were going to do it, right? Come to find out, you smoke it, okay? And the way we smoked it, we actually had a dab rig, like you would smoke like THC wax, essentially like marijuana wax. So we had a dab rig, and he went first, and I had to watch his experience, and it was pretty interesting and crazy. And I was like, whoa, what am I getting myself into? But I still I didn't really know exactly what to expect. I had done a little bit of research, but I didn't really want to learn a whole bunch about it, and I wasn't really looking up other people's experiences or nothing like that. So basically, what happens for me, so we heat up the dab rig, put the little dab of it on there, and I take a hit, and literally as I'm taking the hit, I'm going to hold it in. By the time I let it out and I exhale, literally it's I'm exhaling the smoke out, And before the smoke is all the way gone, like I am blasting off. Like I just remember, like basically I was going through like, it kind of, how do I explain this? It's kind of like a tunnel, okay? And I just like warp speed through this tunnel, and it was like the most beautiful colors you'd ever imagine, just multiple colors, like every hue, and so bright, and it's like, you know, like colors you don't even really get to see here in this reality. And I was just like blasting through this, and I eventually, on the other side, I shot out, and I ended up in kind of like this like realm of like bright white, you know, essentially. It was like nothingness, basically. So I went from like all this color just to like this empty, vast, open space of nothingness. Sometimes I feel like it was black, sometimes I feel like it was white, maybe it was both. I again, like sometimes it's hard for the ego mind to like comprehend everything that it experienced. But so after that had happened, I was there, and this whole time I keep saying but really it wasn't truly like Cameron, it wasn't the ego identification. Like I was pure awareness at this point. Like I couldn't recall like who I was, I couldn't recall past memories, I couldn't recall even being in my room about to smoke this stuff. Like I was just gone, and then all of a sudden just like pure awareness. Essentially our Satnam, our true identity as it is without this ego identity that we have. And so I just remember, you know, being this witness, observing the space I'm in, and I remember these two giant, like silhouette type beings were above me. Above me is, I mean, they were like kind of in front of me, but they were just really tall, and they were like looking down at me. I couldn't see their faces or anything other than, like I said, it was just like an outline of their bodies. And they were like communicating with me without words. It was really interesting. Like I could sense like an immense amount of like knowledge and wisdom being passed through from them to me, and they didn't have to speak any words. And you know, this conversation or this communication happened for what felt like quite a long time. That's one thing about when you're on DMT, like it only lasts like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, if that. But time, literally, the perception of time is like gone. Like it feels like hours, if not days, if not weeks. Like it's really, really hard to kind of comprehend like time while you're in this other dimension. And I say other dimension because honestly, I believe that DMT, it takes you to another place. It's not like any other trip that I've done. It's not like acid or mushrooms or anything like that, where, you know, we all have a different experience. DMT, there's been people that have actually mapped out what a DMT trip is like and where it takes you and so on and so forth. And, you know, I am sure some of you may have experienced some of what I've experienced and vice versa. Because it's, again, my belief that it really does take you to another dimension, essentially. It takes you to another place, another reality, almost. And yeah, so after these beings, and you know, we're kicking it and just, you know, doing our thing, and I'm just kind of like, again, observing and just like taking in all of this energy and all of this wisdom and stuff that they're passing on to me. Time starts going by, and eventually, I don't know how long I was there for, but eventually I end up coming back into my room, all right? And when I say into my room, it wasn't like literally like the same way as I left it though. Like it was like an alternate reality. It was like an alternate dimension of my room. My homie Thomas, he was there with me, right? But in this dimension, I was by myself. He was not in that room anymore, okay? And so I'm just like, I'm back now, and I'm back in my body, and awareness, you know, of this self is back. And this is when time really starts getting dragged on. And I couldn't tell you how long I was here for. This is when it literally started feeling like days almost, or just like a really long time. And I was just kind of sitting around. I'm like, okay, like when is this over? And I started kind of having some like fears start coming up, and I was like, you know, what's happening? Like, I kind of remember asking, like, I kind of remember like calling out to my buddy Thomas, like asking like how long it had been, and I faintly remember hearing something, but yeah, it was just really odd. And eventually what ends up happening is out of nowhere, my girlfriend at the time, who's now my ex, she appeared. Okay, and when I say she appeared, like, she was like a physical manifestation, like right here in the flesh in front of me, like as real looks. And she was standing there in the room and just crying, like just crying and crying and crying and crying and crying. And I couldn't quite figure it out. I couldn't like communicate to her, I couldn't talk to her. And so I'm just sitting here with this like thought. I'm like, what the heck is going on? Like, where am I? Like, how long have I been here? Why is she crying? And I'm trying to figure out like what's happening now, you know? And it was at this point that I started thinking like, oh shit, dude, like you died, you know? Like, I started thinking like, man, like you smoked this DMT and you died, and you're now in this other reality, this other dimension, this in-between stage of maybe like where we go on to the next life or something like that. And I'm sitting here like trying to just soak this in, and like I'm like, whoa, like that's why she's crying. Like, you died, she's crying, and I felt as if like I was like observing her from a different perspective. Like basically like she knew that I had died, and I was witnessing her crying over me dying, if that makes sense. And it was like really wild, man. And I had to, at that moment, like one of two things was going to take place. Like, I could get very scared and allow fear to take over, but to my surprise, that's not what happened. In that moment, I was like, okay, you died, bro. And I remember laying back into my carpet, and I remember just like sinking into the carpet. Like, it literally felt like I was like dropping down into it, and then I became the carpet. And it was at that moment I was like, all right, bro, like this is cool. And I accepted my death, and I wasn't fearful, and I was like, you know what, man, this ain't that bad. Like, I can be the carpet, you know. And I this was the first time like I truly had felt this connection of everything, of oneness, you know. Experiencing yourself being the carpet is pretty wild, man, because it's like, you know, it's a man-made thing. It's not something that, you know, is like you and I with this consciousness, you know. But still, like, I became the carpet, you know, and I accepted my death. And yeah, it really blew my mind, man. And then I don't know how long I was the carpet for, but then eventually I snapped out of it and I started coming back into the room. And my buddy Thomas was there again, and he of course had to have some fun with me. And I just remember he's like kind of like hunched over a little bit on his cell phone in the corner, and there's a light on him. And I remember him just like chanting out loud. He was like, I am a golden god, I am a golden god, I am a golden god, okay? And like literally I was like, bro, stop. Like, he was like tripping me out, man. Because I'm looking at him, and like he turns into like liquid gold, and like starts dripping, like literally, like imagine just like somebody's entire body being liquid gold, just like dripping globs of gold. And it was so wild, so crazy. But yeah, so that was my experience, and my first experience with an ego death, where like Cameron the false I that I believed to be myself had to die, and I had to accept that death. And at the time, like I said, I had perceived her, my ex girlfriend at the time, that she had witnessed my death. But it was really crazy, man, and it took a lot of time to integrate everything that I had experienced. Literally like 2 years later, I was still like reflecting back on this experience and like trying to understand really what happened and like what was really going on. Looking back on it now, I think it was kind of my subconscious, or probably more like my higher self, was like showing me what was happening in that moment, and I really wasn't aware of it. But come to find out, during that time period, me and my ex, we were kind of like starting to drift apart, and I know she had been quite emotional throughout that experience, I guess, and not feeling connected to me. And there was moments when she would be crying a lot and I didn't even know about it. So sometimes I look back and I wonder if that's what that was. Maybe it was my highest self showing me like, hey dude, like, you're screwing this up, and like, if you want to actually make this work, you got to be there for her. And I guess maybe that could have been what it was, but I didn't actually understand that then. Who really knows? I still don't know exactly what the whole experience was supposed to tell me, but I do know that it caused an ego death for myself. And a couple years later, I ended up waking up fully, and I would imagine that definitely played a role in allowing that type of awakening to happen in a few years. But yeah, so that was my experience with DMT. Absolutely a phenomenal experience. And I've had another experience as well, not quite like that. It was more a visual experience. I ended up in like this like dome type reality. It was again pure awareness. That time I had I didn't like blast all the way off and through and have like this crazy ego death or none of that. It was more like I was awareness inside this church-like or dome-like, or I don't really know how to explain it, but again, the colors, like, whoa, colors were so beautiful. And my awareness would take me into these different sections of this like structure, and my awareness would be like focused on a specific point, and then that specific point would start fractaling out, and as it fractaled, it would then create this like giant dome that I'm like looking at, and it's like these like huge pillars and just like beautiful colors, and then my awareness would like flow through this place, and then I would then observe another thing, and then that would start fractaling out, and it would start doing some just crazy stuff. And that was a really cool experience as well. Just not quite, the same as the first, but that's a couple of my experiences I've had with DMT. And yeah, man, so it was really dope. And I would probably do it again. Again, if it finds me and I have the opportunity, and I feel it resonates in the moment, like, okay, cool, but at the end of the day, like, I'm not one to like abuse these type of spiritual tools per se. I use them specifically for spiritual expansion, and getting in touch, or maybe like if I was like seeking certain answers and stuff. But I'm at a point now where like majority of what I do is mostly internal. I mean, I'll still do like mushrooms and stuff like that on occasion, and it's been a while since I've done LSD, but yeah, so pretty wild stuff, man. And if you have had an experience with DMT that's similar, or maybe not even similar, and you just want to share it, feel free and drop a comment below. Let me know what you thought about my experience, and if you saw any similarities, or you just want to share yours. I'd be super interested to hear. I find a lot of joy in just hearing what people had experienced themselves, because it's a really cool thing. And like I said, it's my belief that we go to another dimension, another place, and it's always cool hearing other similarities where it sounds like I kind of went to the same place as them. But yeah, if you like this video, feel free and give it a thumbs up. Make sure and subscribe to my channel. I'm going to be talking about some more of my hallucinogenic experiences here in the future. I think the next video I might actually talk about not DMT, we just talked about that, LSD, and the loops, and the time I got stuck in like a super loop. Yeah, so that'll be a fun one and a really wild story as well. But yeah, appreciate y'all. One love. Have an amazing day.